Welcome to the Built by Will podcast. I'm here today with Frankie Dades. He is a 10,000 athlete, a BPN athlete, and an endurance athlete. Let's dive in. Welcome. Appreciate you coming on.
What's going on?
How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me, man. I'm good, hanging in there.
Awesome. So I know we connected more so through BPN. I actually remember the first time I saw you was at the BPN, the marathon, and you were so fucking locked in that I remember trying to introduce myself, and you were just, huh?
Oh,
I think it was
dude,
before.
You're talking
it was
about
before.
After the fact? Oh, before.
No,
all right.
it was before. Yeah,
I'm sure
so,
we'll get into the conversation, but afterwards, I was not speaking to anybody. I was in a bad shape.
Absolutely, yeah. You were so locked in, and that's something that I think I've appreciated about you since day one. Is oftentimes I feel like people can't really relate to us deciding to not drink, us deciding to not go out, to not do a lot of things that normal people are doing, right? And I always feel like we sound almost kind of douchey when we're like, I'm just built different, like it's. But we never mean it that way. We just mean it as like, this is how we want to live our lifestyle. And I feel like you're one of those people who lives within that kind of like that same light. And so I feel like it's few and far between people I can relate to on like a really, really expansive level. And I feel like you're one of those people. So appreciate you.
Yeah, that hit the nail on the head for sure. It's just, I was actually having a conversation about this yesterday with one of my friends, and he's kind of like new to that, like that lifestyle of like, he's like at the point where I was when I first decided to change my lifestyle. And like, he's just like, he feels like alone. And he's like, I feel like no one understands, and I'm like, listen, there's plenty people out there who live the same lifestyle that like I do. And the only way they'll ever cross your path is if you take that jump. So if it's something you want to do, definitely go for it, because you'll lose people that aren't like-minded, and you'll be reconnected with people who just constantly motivate you because they're doing the same thing you are, just always goal-oriented, striving for something. And that's definitely why we've connected, because we're both, goal-oriented people who are constantly looking for the next thing to pursue.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I had a similar conversation with a friend of mine, in the sense of, I feel like we're so afraid to outgrow people that you stick around people that have just been there forever, even though you're not really on the same, you're not on the same wavelength, right? And it doesn't mean you're better than them or that they're not better than you or anything like that. It's just more so where you're going, they're not, and I feel like putting ourselves around people that are where we are currently is a big part of, why social media is so big, right? Like, you can be in your shell and you can be reclusive and you can be really, really introverted and not reach out to anybody, or, you can surround yourself with people who either are where you want to be or at least are where you are, right? So that way, we don't want anchors in our life. We want propellers. And so I feel like that's a big part of why, I joined the BPN community, and I've connected with people like you, because, we need people to propel us forward, right? There's enough shit in the world, as an anchor that's pulling us down, that's slowing us down. The people who we choose to be around don't need to be that. So definitely.
100%, man. I like that. Not an anchor, propeller. I never heard that before, but it's.
If you use that in one of your captions, bro, you gotta tag me in that at least. You gotta give me some credit.
I definitely will. I'm gonna cook something up and definitely give you that credit.
Awesome. And so, Built by Will is as a training business, right? I started off as a training business. The reason why, I chose the name Built by Will is, obviously I'm Will, you're built by me, but the double entendre that I don't think a lot of people see is that you're built by you. You're built by your will. You're built by your willpower. You're built by the things that you choose to push for, the things that you choose to strive for. And so, right off the bat, I got to ask you, what does willpower mean to you?
Willpower always, when I hear that word, means to me more like controlling your emotions, having control over your emotions and your urges and wants, and basically being able to give up short-term comfort for long-term goals.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's the word comfort is really, really important, right? Because, there's growth is challenging and it's scary and it's frightening and it's uncomfortable. I would say uncomfortable is probably the best word, right? Rather than it being scary, it's just more so it's something you've never seen or something you've never experienced. And I feel like a lot of people kind of, live in that comfort of their lives. And, there's nothing wrong with that. There's moments in my life where, things are going too fast and I just need to go sink into what's comfortable, right? Like I need to go have some of my grandma's food, or I need to go hit a workout that I enjoy rather than what's on the training program, or, I need to reach out to a friend that I know brings me peace and, puts me in a good mindset. And
that's where like
at the same time,
the willpower comes in, because you're always going to want to go back to what's normal to you and what's comfortable. And, if your goal is to lose weight, you got to have that willpower to not, divert from that plan. If your goal is to run a marathon, you're going to have the willpower to get up and run every day, follow what's on that schedule. So yeah, the whole thing with that is kind of breaking out of that comfort zone, which most people live a long time in and unfortunately never get out of it. And that's what I constantly try to prevent myself from doing, is staying there, because I did that for so long and I got tired of it. And so now it's just constantly having willpower to just keep moving forward. And I'm always striving for the next goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard a great quote. I don't know who said it, but they said most people die at 25. They're just not buried until they're 80, right? Which I think is super powerful, and it always gives me chills right now thinking of that. And I think a big part of what you do is you're a firefighter, man. Like willpower is a huge part of what you do. You run directly into something that every sense of being is telling you not to. And so I want to ask you, just because I've never been able to, what made you decide to go be a firefighter? What made you decide to go pursue that? Because I mean, being a firefighter in general is huge, right? But in New York City, I'm sure that it's intense. And so what made you choose to do that?
Yeah, so right now I'm on the ambulance. So we're with the fire department. You go one way or the other. But I joined strictly for the camaraderie. I love the brotherhood and having that group that is always going to be there for you. I also always had a passion for serving people and helping people in their worst days. And I guess that's where also, why I started posting on social media, is because I just have a passion to always be there for someone. And whether that's at work, when I'm helping someone on their worst day, or I'm helping someone achieve their best day. So it's just, for me, it's just always been a very selfless thing, and always just wanting to give back. I feel like you get more out of life when you give rather than you take. You're always looking to take. So by giving back to people, serving, that's just fulfillment for me. So that's really what drove me to pursue that.
That's awesome, man. I know that there's definitely like the firefighting route, and then there's the ambulance route, and y'all see some crazy stuff. Like, I know I don't, right? Absolutely. I've heard some horror stories of just, things that I know I couldn't get myself through seeing and witnessing, right? And I like that you said that, camaraderie is a big part of what you do, because I feel like that's a big part of why you are who you are and you have the impact that you have, like on the social media, side of things. I feel like the BPN community it feeds into that camaraderie, right? Where, I work 65, 70 hours a week, and it gets to a point where you feel like at times that, just no one can relate, right? No one can relate. And I feel like human connection is one of the biggest things that people chase, is that they want to just feel connected, right? They don't need to necessarily to be talking to someone every day, be having their phone blown up with somebody, be around someone every day, but just to feel like you're not alone is big, right? And I can see that camaraderie is, a big part of who you are as a person, and definitely can relate.
Yeah, it's nice too, like, having, like I said, like-minded people, even if you don't speak every day, or just being part of the community, like you just said, like BPN or 10,000. Like, it's nice to go on social media and my feed is just filled with people who are just getting after it in some way or another. And to me, that's awesome, because you really don't feel like you're alone. Whereas like the beginning of the journey, when I really didn't have those connections yet with those people, I felt like I was the only person that was doing what I was doing. So it's nice to like see people constantly just, getting after it in their own way. And it's like motivation to keep doing it, because you're like, all right, like you get up at 4 a.m. and if I look at my phone and I see 5 other people I know who are also up or were up already, like, it's just, all right, I'm not alone anymore. Like, they're out getting after it. They're suffering too. Like, I'm about to go do it too. So it's nice.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest ones, is when you really feel like you don't want to, you're reminded of why you do, because you're a person who does, what they say they're going to do, and you surround yourself with people who are much of the same, right? I feel like finding your whys is huge, right? Because at the end of the day, you could just stop working out today. You could stop running after you got that injury. You could have just put it in the can and gone after the bodybuilding thing, because you're good at it, right? You can win that easily, right? And I feel like that's, whenever seeing you go after that, I felt like you were in your bread and butter, right? Like you were in your wheelhouse for sure. Like, yeah, the diet part of it obviously sucks, but I feel like the workouts themselves, right? Like that was your bread and butter, right? Like that was it's not like the gym isn't challenging to me anymore in the way that running is. Like mentally, it doesn't bring the same level, right? I was 6'2", 140 pounds, my senior year of high school, and I was just super just self-conscious, right? And then I gained all the weight, and I've had the weight on my frame now for 4 years, and it got to the point where the gym wasn't doing it for me anymore, right? Like it just wasn't doing it for me anymore mentally, the same way that it used to. And then you find people like you find people like Nick that chose to go another route, even though they're obviously killing it, where they are. I feel like that's big.
Yeah, I get that 100%. And yeah, bodybuilding, I guess, was more in my wheelhouse in the sense that I've always like I've been lifting since I'm 13 years old. So, and I've, followed a bunch of bodybuilders growing up. I've watched documentaries. So that aspect was like familiar to me, and, wasn't anything, challenging. Obviously, when you start dieting down, you're losing energy. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, that's why I guess I was so like attracted to running, and like why I kind of keep pursuing this path is because it's just something I was never good at, and I want to see how far I could get and keep getting better. I want to see where I could draw that line. So, eventually I could wind up doing an ultra marathon. That's what I'd like to do. My line used to be drawn at 1-2 miles. I couldn't run more than that. Then I did a half marathon. I was like, all right, well, my limit's not there. I'm not drawing the line there. Did a full marathon, got my ass kicked, but I still crossed the finish line. I was like, all right, my limit's not there. I could keep going. Did it again, PR'd. But like, I just feel like there's more in the tank, and I just want to keep pushing and seeing how far I could take this. And, that's for me, like, all the motivation I need. I guess you could even say that's why. It's just constantly that's my why. It's constantly proving to myself that I could go farther than I've ever thought. because like I said, running, I could not run more than a mile, more than 2 miles at one point without stopping, hands on the knees, panting for air. So it's just, for me, it's just the mental challenge. So I would like to, at some point, dive back into bodybuilding, but I can't just, every time I consider it and think about it, I still have what I want to achieve in the endurance space first. And it's like nagging at me. And if I just leave and do something else right now, it'll bother me. So I definitely want to take this as far as I can.
Absolutely. I liked what you said about, that there's more in the tank. I feel like the scariest thing would be getting to the end of your life and, meeting the person who did all the things that you said you were going to do and realizing that you didn't. Right. And I think that's big, right? Like what you said when you started lifting when you were 13, right? I feel like a lot of who we are is something that we've established since we were little. And I like that your why in the fitness space is, challenging yourself to do things that you never thought you could do. For me, that's my definition of willpower is, going after, pushing past my own perceived limits that I set on myself, right? Not even that other people set on me, that I set on myself. And so with that being said, when you were 13, getting into the gym, deciding to start kind of, chasing that lifestyle, where did you get your willpower from? Like as like a center of who you are, where do you get your willpower from to get up every day, to get up at 5 a.m., go to the gym, then you have a full day of work, then you got to come home and do more, and then you got to wake up and do it again the next day. Where does that come from?
Yeah. So just to track back a little bit, I started I always played sports, and I started lifting when I was 13. And, but I wouldn't say that like I was like, gung ho. Like I never stopped. I was always active, but I just had that self-doubt, and I had those limits on myself, and I believed them. So I was, average at anything I did, and I would quit a lot that I did when I had talent. And I never, I could have progressed so much. I played football, I boxed, basketball, I played hockey for a period of time, and I had talent and all that. And I bring up especially boxing because I boxed since my dad had me in the ring since I'm in 4th grade, and I didn't stop until I went to college. And I was and it's not me bragging, but I had all the talent in the world, but I psyched myself out whenever I had an opponent. Now, that's not to say that I never did well, but a lot of times I lost before I got in the ring because I was already I was giving the other person credit I was why he beat me, why he would beat me, what he's better at, and that lasted for a long time. And one day I just got sick of it, and I'd say I started to really like channel that energy of like, all right, I'm tired of being average and believing my self-doubts and limiting myself in all aspects of life. And I'd say like a few years ago is when I really dug into that. So the question was, would you ask the question? Sorry, I got off track.
No, you're good. Where do you get your willpower from?
Yeah, where do I get so willpower comes, now to tie that all in, willpower comes from, remembering what I missed out on, where I wasted all my talent and all those limits and doubts that I placed on myself. Now it's time to prove myself wrong. So I guess I'm constantly keeping in the back of my mind that former version of myself that didn't believe in himself and had no self-confidence, no self-love, and as a result, slacked off, was lazy, made excuses, and quit everything. I'm trying to prove to him that he was wrong, and that's like just keeps me driven all the time and holds me accountable in everything that I do, because I just think back to that, and it's somewhere I never want to be mentally again or physically.
Absolutely. I can definitely relate to, chasing the things that I shied away from when I was younger. Didn't play football in high school. My brother played football. He was a year older than me. And so he was a starting corner, and I wanted to play receiver. I loved football my whole life, but I couldn't stand my brother at the time. We had some issues with my dad. My dad passed away when I was 13, committed suicide. And
Sorry to hear that.
No, yeah, I appreciate it. It put my brother and I in different directions, right? I became reclusive and stayed in and was on Facebook all the time and just was in a dark room and just very, very much so, kept to myself. And he more so, took that a different way and was out and had friends and had all this stuff and loved football. Texas high school football is like one of the biggest things in this nation, right?
Yeah.
And it's probably one of my biggest regrets to this day is that I didn't play because I wanted to be a receiver. He was a corner. And I didn't want to line up against him every single day in practice because I didn't want anything to do with him at the time. And I would say that's a big part of why I'm so active now is because I never was then, right? I loved basketball, but in order to get farther in basketball, you had to play AAU basketball, and my mom didn't have the money for that at the time because it's ridiculously expensive, and she was a single mom, and so basketball was never going to go anywhere just because I couldn't get to that next level. But football was always something that, in Texas, it's super easy to play. And definitely one of my biggest regrets was not doing that. And, much like you, psyching myself out, out of, confronting my brother, out of, confronting the ideas of myself in my head. All those things definitely contributed. So I can definitely relate in the sense of, I'm always chasing down that guy. I'm always chasing down that guy that had all the limiting beliefs and had all the doubts and was just worrying about everything and cared so much about what everybody thought. And so definitely can relate to that.
Yeah, and that was a good word, is regret. I regret, and I hate saying that because it does have its place, and it what we went through, what we didn't do, I guess made us who we are today. But I have regrets of things that I could have done better in, and maybe I could have went to a good college and played a sport, whichever one it was, or maybe I could have pursued boxing. So it in my head, it's like, what could if I had the mentality I have now, what could I have done back then? So obviously you can't think like that and you can't live like that and live in the past. So that's why I apply it to now.
Yeah, I definitely think there's some power in being able to recognize it, right? Like, you never want to live through that mindset, but also I think part of being able to come to terms with it is being able to be honest with yourself, right? Forever I blamed my brother for the reason why I didn't play, right? That I didn't want anything to do with him, that he was a bully, all this stuff, right? At the end of the day, the reason why I didn't play is because I was scared. And, for a long time I was able to kind of blame him, and, you would get to college and play intramurals and you would play and you'd be good. And they're like, why didn't you play? And you're like, I just, I didn't want to be around my brother. When in reality, now, it's just because of me, right? I wasn't ready. Mentally, I wasn't ready. I was putting myself down before I ever got started. And so definitely don't want to live with regret ever, and don't want to, be one of those people living in the past, one of those people vicariously living through their kids or vicariously living through other people. But I definitely think that there's some power in having conversations like this and talking about those moments where, where they came up short, and moments where if you could do it all over again, I'm sure you would change some things. I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
And so with that being said, I know we talked a little bit about, kind of where your willpower comes from, where it stems from, where, your work ethic stems from. Tell me a little bit about a situation in which your willpower was enough, right? Like, you weren't supposed to achieve something. You weren't supposed to be able to get to that point of achieving that goal, but your willpower is what pushed you through.
I would say this past year, last year, I did a half marathon in September of last year, and actually, the times cut into each other. I started bodybuilding prep at the end of the half marathon prep. So it was like 2 weeks where I was away from the half marathon, where I had already started, which isn't smart, but I had already started prepping for a bodybuilding show. Then I did 9 weeks of that, or 8 or 9 weeks, whatever it was. And then I wound up coming in first place in my open and novice classes, which, you know, my first show, I've never had any experience in that realm before, especially with like posing is like a whole science. So like I didn't know anything. And straight from that competition, I was right into marathon prep, which was the BPM marathon. And I only had 9 weeks to train for that, which again wasn't smart. And although the outcome of that marathon wasn't what I had liked at the time, now I look back and it was completely great lesson learned. My willpower to be able to do those throughout the entire time, and just constantly reminding myself that I could do, like, that this is possible. And as long as I keep those negative self-talk thoughts out of my head, I could do both of these. And I wound up winning the bodybuilding competition and then finishing a full marathon. And both of them were in preps that were not as long as you're supposed to. A normal bodybuilding prep is about based on how you walk around throughout the year, it could be anywhere from like 10 to 14 weeks. For some people, it could be more. I did it in about 8 weeks. And then marathon, considering it was my first marathon, I did it in 9 weeks. I trained for 9 weeks, and that's a normal one's like 16 weeks. So I definitely, that my willpower was a contributing factor in being able to do all three of those events, kind of back to back to back, and pushing through, and still being able to complete them and do, halfway decent. So it's definitely your own limitations and emotions and urges that could stop you from achieving anything that you're pursuing. I can't blame it on anything else. There were plenty of people that were telling me that's not smart, don't do this. They're completely different sides of the spectrum, bodybuilding and running a marathon. And all I did was believe in myself, and I knew I could do it. I didn't listen to anybody or anything else. And throughout the entire time, I was fighting those voices in my head, just saying, like, what the hell am I doing? Throughout the bodybuilding prep, where I'm done with my calories by like 3 o'clock, and I'm like, what am I going to do for the rest of the day? And I had like no energy to speak. Like the bare minimum I could do was move and like say a few words. Like that's just how I felt. And I was like, why am I doing this? And at any time, I just like, I could have just quit, and I could have just said, I'm not doing this for what? Well, there's nothing, I'm not, it's not my job, and I'm not winning money. Like it was simply just a mental challenge for myself. And that kept me going through the whole time, was just remembering why I'm doing it and fighting those thoughts that like, why am I doing this? And then after the bodybuilding competition, going into the marathon prep, when I'm not used to really running those big miles that you have to run in a marathon prep, because I just came off that half marathon. The most I ran was like 9 miles for that. Now it's freezing out. It's getting into those winter months, and now I'm running miles that I've never ran before and volume that I've never ran before. And I'm like, why am I doing this? What the hell am I doing? And I just kept reminding myself, it's a mental challenge. We're trying to get better mentally, and that's all you need to know. That's all you need to just remember, that crossing the finish line, getting up on stage, you made it there. That's just the end of it. What we're getting from this entire journey is the most important part. People look at that end destination and that goal and like the medal and the trophy and crossing a finish line, or, getting placed in a bodybuilding competition. But that's literally just one moment. You have to enjoy the the journey to get there, because that's where you're truly going to learn about yourself. So definitely the odds were stacked against me based on experience and timing and all that throughout that whole process. But willpower definitely helped me get through, and, you know, I came out pretty well.
Yeah, man, that's insane. I watched you do this. I watched you do all of this. And being a nutrition coach, being a trainer, I understand 100% how far you took your body, right? Like, absolutely in no sense of any world at all should you ever. And if anyone's listening, please don't go and do, you know, a half marathon and do a bodybuilding show and do a full marathon all within 24 weeks of each other doing 3 different things. Like, no, you had all the odds stacked against you. Absolutely. Exact opposite nutrition goals, exact opposite goals in the gym, exact opposite mindset goals. You know, literally you couldn't have done 2 things that are more different than each other. And the fact that you won the bodybuilding show off of an 8-week build is insane. Like, I write, you know, 1 phase of a program for 8 weeks typically, right? That's not going to get anyone ready for a bodybuilding show, which just goes to show the level of intensity that you're bringing to each and every one of those workouts, right? And finishing your calories, like you said, at 3 p.m. and you have the rest of the day to just sit there and stir in your stupidity and just be like, why did I do that to myself, you know?
Yeah.
I get it, man. Absolutely. And I like what you said about, you know, not only enjoying the journey, but understanding the purpose of the journey, right? Because when we're getting into those heavy miles and we're getting into those long distances and your body's starting to be like, hey man, like, I don't know how much more I can do. And you just have to be like, shut up, just do it. Just do it. Just do it. And I think that there's a lot of power in that, right? Like, there's a lot of power in things that suck. And I think we as humans were designed to run away from those things. We're designed to run away from those things that make us uncomfortable. We're designed to run away from those things that suck. And I think you ran into the thick of it. And you came out on top, right? I remember seeing you at that marathon, and you were not a happy camper. And I remember seeing you after it, and you were not a happy camper. But at the end of it, you fucking did.
You want me to touch on that?
Absolutely. So, I'm definitely gonna have you touch on that, because I saw you there, and I was like, and I did the typical, like, man, Frankie's an asshole kind of thing. Like, I was super excited to meet you, and I came up with all this energy, and I was like, hey man, like, I've been following you for a while now. Like, I'm super excited to meet you. And you're like, yeah, what's up? And that's all I got, right? Like, I came in looking for like 100.
I don't even remember that. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
I'm sorry, bro.
No, yeah, you're good. It just shows the level of concentration that you had to have to do all those things. So, I think that ties us into the next question. I do want to know about, like, you know, what happened during that marathon. More importantly, you know, what happened after, because, you know, we had the whole BPN community was out chilling and talking to each other, and I don't remember seeing you once after that marathon. And so, you know, kind of when you get to the end of something like that, right, where your body is pushed to the limits and your mind is pushed to the limits, I would say more so your mind is pushed to the limits. You know, when you cross the finish line, like, where were you at?
Yeah, so yeah, like I said, I apologize about that. It was just like, okay. I don't know. It was definitely felt off. Like, I guess it's another thing with the bodybuilding competition. It took me like a couple months after to like start feeling normal again, my body and everything. So going into that training completely depleted, I don't know. It just messed with my body a lot. So like, I was very dialed in on that day. And I learned my lesson about trying to do things that are on the complete opposite spectrum of each other. And basically what happened was I ran the marathon, coached myself. Another thing that isn't really, you know, I learned from this, always ask for help. If you don't know something, don't try and do it yourself. There's no harm in, you know, asking someone who knows more than you. So I did hire a coach eventually, but I didn't for this marathon. So I didn't really have much knowledge on nutrition, fueling, things like that, water intake and electrolyte intake. So leading up to the marathon, the 2 days before, I chugged 2 gallons of water, thinking I was hydrating, but in reality, I was flushing out any electrolyte stores I had in my body unknowingly, and ran the marathon. Started off, I felt decent, not bad. You definitely could tell it was like hilly. It was
rough out there.
it was cool out at first. It was very hilly though, as you know, I'm sure. It wound up being
man.
like 800 feet of elevation gain and loss. And I'm doing all right. I definitely like it was hurt. It was kicking my ass, but I was like getting through it, and I was actually on pace. My goal was anything below 4 hours, and at the 18 or 19 mile mark, I looked at my watch and I was on pace for about a 350 if I kept up where I was, or even if I sped up a little bit, started picking it up, maybe I could do 345. So I was like, I'm happy with that. That's fine. At mile 20, I hit the mile 20 marker. My quad starts twitching. I'm getting this weird twitch I've never felt before, unfamiliar with this. And I'm like, what is that? So I'm like rubbing it as I'm running. Now I'm realizing that I'm like, I'm getting some type of cramp. And I'm like, I should probably hydrate. So I'm grabbing G1M from the aid stations, trying to chug it. Mile 20.5 comes, and now it's like getting painful, but I'm still moving. I hit 21, or it was like towards the end of 20, and I'm going to take a step, and my quad just completely locks, and I fall to the ground, and it's convulsing like this, and I'm making a fist and opening my hand. That's what it looked like. And I'm looking, it looked like there was an alien in my leg moving, and it was painful. And I'm just rolling on the floor. Now I'm in between two aid stations because they were about 2 miles apart.
Dude,
no one's around.
Like they were so far away from each other.
Yeah. Yes. No one's around because you're in the back country roads of Texas, and it wasn't an open marathon to anybody. It was a closed private one. So now I'm rolling on the floor and trying to like get movement back in my leg because I could not bend it. And I'm just sitting. One kid ran by and he was like, "Oh, I'll go tell the aid station." I'm like, "Yeah, go please." And I'm like battling in my mind, like, "Yo, just lay here and wait for someone to come and get you. Like, you're not finishing this. There's 6.2 miles to go, and you can't move your leg." I laid there. I didn't lay there. Like, I was trying to bend my leg, and for about 10 minutes, I remember because I was watching my watch, and I pretty much accepted that there's no sub 4 in that race. But I was like, I have to get up. I'm not waiting for someone to come and get me, and I'm not finishing this. So I stood up, finally was able to bend my leg enough, and I just start kind of like limping. And now it was 20-mile-per-hour headwinds, and that last 6 miles, I'm sure you remember, was the hilliest part of the race. So I'm limping by myself. There's not another soul around me for 6 miles, by myself, trying to ignore the pain in my leg. And then now it goes to my left leg. My left leg starts convulsing. By the time I got to the end of that finish line, I couldn't bend my legs. I like wobbled across the finish line, and then took a picture with Nick, and then Brian Mazza and the Kane footwear guys helped me. Like, I put my arms on their shoulders, and they like helped me go over to the truck to sit down because I couldn't. They looked at me. I was like, I can't move my legs right now. And that entire time, those last 6 miles, I don't think I'm exaggerating at all. Every step I said, next aid station, just quit. They'll drive you back. That's it. You're never doing another marathon. Like, every bad thought that you could possibly think was in my head. And I just somehow kept pushing them away and kept moving and just wound up finishing. Obviously, I finished 4:19. That wasn't my goal, but I crossed the finish line unable to move my legs. So after the marathon, I just was so disappointed in myself and angry. At the time I felt like kind of like I failed, even saying like maybe I quit, like just very negative about myself. I wound up going and hanging out with Brian Mazza after at his hotel with the Kane footwear guys. and they were like, talking to me or whatever to help me feel a little bit better. But I wasn't in like a sociable mood for the most part, just because I was very down on myself. It had nothing to do with anybody else. I wasn't. I knew that I couldn't have expected anything else with the time that I gave myself, and I guess I was disappointed that I thought I could do better than I did.
Yeah.
But going forward, I look back now. Like at first, I was just embarrassed about it, embarrassed to myself and disappointed, and I didn't even want to think about it. I didn't like. I wanted to forget the entire experience. Yeah. But that was in the moment. Next 2 days pass, and like you get some perspective on it. And I wound up hiring a coach and doing a prep the right way. Now I learned so much from that that it helped me in my next marathon. I learned what not to do beforehand. I learned the proper amount of time. I learned how like speed work and long runs and fueling and nutrition, and wound up running a marathon May. So I gave myself, it was actually 4 months on the dot. January 29th was the BPM marathon, and May 29th was the Buffalo, New York marathon. And I wound up PRing 42 minutes. And now I can look back and say, if that never happened to me, let's say I did, I finished in 350 and like I wanted to, or I thought I was gonna, I probably would have never learned anything from that, because I would have just kept doing what I did leading up to that, thinking it was the right way and it worked. And I probably would have never gotten better and thought like I didn't need anybody to guide me and learn. There was nothing more I could be taught. Who knows? I don't really think like that, but that could have happened. I know for a fact that I probably would have thought that I did a lot right if I didn't fail. So there was definitely a reason for that that I see now, but in the time I didn't see, obviously. So that's where my head was at afterwards. So again, I apologize. I just was in bad headspace.
No, you're good. Knowing what I know now, going into it, social media is great, but we don't share everything. And being someone like you who inspires a lot of people, it's there's no way of me knowing how you were feeling mentally going into the race. I was just psyched to meet you, bro. And then during that race, the race was brutal, bro. Those hills were brutal. I remember I was wearing this shirt specifically. I was wearing it.
Oh, really?
And the first half up, I was like, oh, dude, it's hot. Like, I'm going to ditch this shirt. I'm just going to throw it away. And thank God I just rolled up the sleeves and zipped it down, because on the way back, that wind was insane. It was absolutely insane. Yeah. And I was cold as fuck right after. And so I was like, thank God I didn't ditch this. I remember ditching my gloves. I threw them and I was like, whatever, I'll be fine. And then thank God I didn't ditch this, because that second half of that half marathon was brutal. And I got to the end of it, unknowingly being like, I could have done more, because if I would have known the back half was going to be so hard, I would have took the front half harder. I would have ran it harder, knowing that the back half was going to be that brutal. So I started off slow. I was like, I don't want to overdo it. I got COVID a week before that, so I tested negative 2 days before that race.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, I don't want to blow up and not finish it. And so the first half I didn't go as hard, but in hindsight, knowing how hard that back half was, I would have gone harder, because I could have, but hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
But man, that race was brutal. So I don't blame you at all.
Lessons learned, man. Lessons learned. It was valuable, and I'm very thankful that did happen to me.
Absolutely. And so I think we touched base on the next question, which is, talk about a time where your willpower wasn't enough, right? And I know we touched base on boxing and you kind of psyching yourself out, but I'd really love to hear you kind of talk a little bit more about that, right? About, I know that your willpower didn't guide you through finishing your boxing career the way you wish you would have. And so I want to ask you, what did you learn from that? Being who you are now, being able to look back and with humility and being humble, and looking back on, where you could have gone with your whole boxing career, kind of shed some light for everybody on, where you really could have taken it, and, what you learned from the fact that your willpower at that time in your life wasn't enough to get you to where you wanted to go.
Yeah. That was that is something that I think about a lot, is because I love boxing. Like, that's my favorite sport in the world, and it was a bond that I had with me and my father. He was my trainer. He had ran a few boxing gyms, and I just always wanted to make him proud, you know. And something like deep down inside of me, just I couldn't progress because I just had such little confidence in myself. And had I ever shook that and got rid of it, there was so many opportunities. The gym that my dad ran had multiple pro athletes who went on to have successful careers in pro boxing, or even just, you know, not even where they maybe, you know, made it big, like a big name fighter, but still had a nice career with big competitions in the amateurs and then going into the pros. And me, I never really, I never wanted to pursue that. I never wanted to enter those big competitions. I never wanted to consider going pro because I was like, I'm not good enough. And I guess what I learned from that was that you don't know unless you give it 100%. And I was never willing to give it 100%. And now I learned later in life that you need to be all in on something, or just don't do it at all, because there's no half in, half out. And that's basically what I was. I was half in. I was going there every day. You know, I was hitting the bag. I was padding down, hitting the pads with my dad, sparring different people. But my mind wasn't there. My confidence wasn't there. So I guess the learning lesson from that was definitely, you know, as I said before, to stop doubting yourself. That's the only thing that's ever going to stop you, is the doubt for yourself. And that stopped me from doing one of my favorite sports that I've ever participated in. So I guess, you know, it's like I said, it's something that I always will regret, and never did see my full potential. At this age, it's kind of hard to get, like, people say, oh, you should get back into it. Boxing is something where you peak very early, and when at my age or now, if I try getting into it, there's, you know, and it's the reality of the sport. I'm a little bit late in the game. Like, most people start their pro career like early 20s, and like by this time they're either well known and, you know, well established, or they're kind of done and they're moved on. And I missed that window. You know, I still like to hit the bag and would love to get back in a boxing gym, and, you know, a couple times a week for the workout, and just to keep my skills sharp. Eventually, once I'm done in like the endurance space, or, you know, take a break from the endurance space. But I know that anything I could have pursued is pretty much out the window at this point. So yeah, that big takeaway too is I never want to live with regret again, and I never want to live with not knowing what my potential was.
Absolutely. I mean, it's powerful, right? Like, I think regret can be a powerful thing, whether it's positive or a negative, right? I'll never, like, when I have, I always joke around when I have kids, I'm like, they're playing football for sure. You know, of course, if they want to, right? It's not like I'm going to make them, but definitely understanding the power of regret, understanding having to look back and, you know, see what could have been and what will never be, right? I think it's a powerful thing if you use it in your favor, right? I never want to be the person who doubts myself that much again, because I know the regret that will come from it later on, right? When you got up in that marathon and you finished that shit, you know what it felt like to not get up, right? You know what it felt like to just stay there and just kind of let yourself lose. And, you know, even if you weren't going to hit your goal, you sure as hell weren't going to fucking get carted off from a marathon. you were like, fuck that. I'm going to finish this race no matter how ugly it is. And I think that's the beauty in it, right? Like, I know exactly who I was when I wasn't confident in myself. And I know exactly who I am now that I am. And if I could have this confidence back then, of course, everything would have been different. But I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for what I went through before and who I was before. And I think that we got to give some credit to ourselves in the sense of we're not who we were. And, you probably wouldn't be who you are today if those things didn't happen.
Yeah. I actually made a post after that marathon when I was on the floor on the road, like with my convulsing leg. I kind of had like a it was weird. I was just like thinking of random things, and I had like a flashback of when I first started boxing when I was in 4th grade, and I was going like just so because you see these guys in the ring, and like they make it look so easy fighting each other, and it looks like it's just I could get in there and do that too. And I was boxing maybe for 2 months at the time. I'm a little kid, and I just kept saying to my dad, I was like, I want to get in the ring. I want to get in the ring. And he's like, you got to wait. Like, this isn't something that you rush. And I just kept saying, I want to get in the ring. I want to get in the ring. And one day, I guess he got tired of me asking, and he's like, all right, he's going to have to learn that you can't rush this stuff. And he said, you're going to spar this kid. And it was a kid that was my age, a little bit heavier. We get in the ring. Long story short, he beat my ass for 3 rounds around the ring, and I was getting beat so bad that I fell to the ground and pretended I was knocked out just so I could quit, like they would end the fight, and I didn't have to finish. So while I'm on the ground in the marathon, I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, well, maybe I rushed this process like I did back then. I did. I rushed getting in the ring. Granted, I was a little kid. I didn't know any better, but I rushed getting in the ring when I shouldn't have. I rushed running my first full marathon when I probably shouldn't have. And I said, the only difference is now I know what it's like to not get up. And I said, I'm going to get up because that kid didn't. And I'm going to show him that we could still finish. And not getting up is worse than getting up and getting your ass kicked for another 6 miles or for another 2 rounds in boxing, because that regret would have lasted way longer than anything else. So that was like, it was like a very, very grounding moment in my life, because the two were very similar in the circumstances, and brought me back for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And before I was even able to ask the question, you answered it. The question was, what do you know now about willpower that you wish you could tell younger you? And I think you answered it perfectly. It's just get up, right? Like at the end of the day, we have so much more to give, and at the end of the day, you just need to fucking get up. And I love that. Like that's you literally answered it before I was even able to ask it, and it's simple. And people always ask, you have so much going on, like how do you just keep doing it? It's just you got to get up. Like I've been the person who didn't get up. I've been the reclusive person in the back of the room with the lights off on the laptop, talking to people online, scared to talk to people in person. Starting my business, it was easy to get back into that kind of mindset, right? Like the fitness business is huge and it's super competitive. And, you have great months where you do great, and you have months where you do horrible. And you're like, why do I even do this to myself? Why don't I just go work for somebody? And the next day the sun rises and you get up and you just keep trying. And so I think that's perfect. I think the motto of just get up is exactly what everybody needs to hear. And you'll know when you don't have any left because you'll be done. Right. And I think that the good Lord upstairs will have to take the breath out of me before I won't get up.
And that's the mentality you got to have. I guess getting knocked down so many times in my life, and I've been the person that let it knock me down and keep me down. It built it just built resilience inside of me, where now it's like I get hit with something, life problems occur, like I fail at something, whatever it may be, I get hit with it, and I'm like, all right, like now I can take the hit. Now I get up and I'm like, let's keep going. Or like in Rocky 5, yes, when he's fighting Tommy Gunn and he knocks him down. They're fighting in the street, and Rocky gets up and he goes, I didn't hear no bell. That's like my favorite scene ever, because you don't hear, like, the round's still going. We're not done yet. Absolutely. So that's how I try to look at things.
That's awesome, man. And I think people can learn a lot from people with mindsets like you. And I appreciate you taking the time today to have this conversation. Quickly, I do need to give you time to tell people, how they can get a hold of you, how they can follow you, how they can learn more about you. So that way, again, like we said before, we can surround ourselves with people who have the same mindset as us.
And thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. And I always love having these conversations with people. If you wanna reach out to me, I'm on Instagram, Frankie Dades. That's my name with the initials switched, so it's DRANKIE FADES. And on TikTok, I'm Frankie the Greek. But if you wanna reach out to me at all, Instagram, I answer as many DMs as I see. That as long as it's a genuine message and not spam or whatever, I answer the message for everybody. So if you ever want to reach out, message me. If you have an issue or want some advice, I'm always there to talk.
Absolutely. And if y'all want to go ahead and spam him, I am totally for it. You can just blow him up, give him a bunch of messages he doesn't want to see, but
there's too many of that.
Yeah, I feel you. Awesome having you on today, man. I appreciate you. This is episode number 2, and I appreciate you hopping on. Thank you.
Thanks, man.